William is justifiably facing off against assertions that Meghan Markle intends to litigate against UK Parliament members who have supported Meghan Markle. So let us briefly hear from Holly Lynch, a UK Parliament representative. The Prince has executed a unique action to quiet the growing influence of his brother's wife. Anxiety is building regarding Meghan's newest endeavour, a daring initiative that is transforming and some argue harming the definition of belonging to the royal domain. Consequently, in what way is the Duchess of Sussex's fresh enterprise generating countrywide news and altering the monarchy's public perception? What chain reactions might Prince William's angry determination trigger? Come along as we reveal the hidden occurrences that happened backstage of this blockbuster drama regarding family ties that do not require repairing. At the absolute summit of the British crown, a silent struggle is occurring involving King Charles and his offspring, Prince William. King Charles and Prince William are making an uncommon public showing for a mission that is close and precious to the monarch and the successor to the seat. One might assume their methods would balance one another. Yet they do not whatsoever. The dispute boils down to two extremely distinct modes of thought. Charles trusts in forgiveness and comprehending personal situations. William, conversely, trusts in tactics, preparation, and safeguarding the establishment of the crown at any price, even if it places him in conflict with his elderly dad. King Charles's whole governing approach places kin primarily. He has faith in hushed backstage conversations over beverages. He considers that peacemaking is the optimal method to resolve issues among participants of the royal residence. Honestly, it is not even his error, it is the way he was brought up. And he views this as the honorable route to administer the crown. Yet to an increasing crowd of individuals, particularly his own male heir, this method of letting possesses too many gaps. They perceive his benevolence and wish for domestic harmony as a frailty that no other triumphant sovereign utilizes. This arrangement suits a specific group of aristocrats, those nobles who merely desire to harvest the perks of being regal and not act a part in keeping the significance of being regal extant. One specific aristocrat is the current Duchess of Sussex, Meghan Markle, wedded to the Duke of Sussex, Prince Harry. She was a noble whose connections to the crown were largely used to bolster her image and not else. She maintained no feeling of obligation to the throne. Numerous such nobles lived and resided joyfully within the kingdom. And at the vanguard of this crowd was Meghan. Prince William has been observing this unfold for ages. He has noticed that his dad's leniency and his relatives' carefree attitude is not curing a thing. Rather, he concludes it is diluting the formerly supreme and potent royal label, rendering it frailer. It appears to be granting authority and a stage to whoever desires to talk out opposing the throne. While the kingdom itself is hemorrhaging trust amidst the populace, William senses his father's regime is actively making matters poorer, his brother's wife's deeds. He views them as sour frosting on the dessert and a validation of his dreads. This all came to a head during a specific gathering between dad and lad, where it became agonizingly obvious that they were viewing their predicament from two entirely separate perspectives. Charles perceives domestic ties that require repairing. He views his boys, his son's wife, and others linked to the clan and trusts the troubles can be fixed over a couple of appointments by discussing emotions and sentiments. William, however, observes something else completely. He identifies a difficulty that a rigid application of regulations and authority could rectify immediately. He notices frail limbs that require severing before they contaminate the remainder of the timber. William beholds an organization that has endured for a millennium because it possessed distinct laws that everybody obeyed. The crown persisted for so long because it understood when to adjust but also when to be stern and stationary. Above all, it possessed a distinct backbone. A backbone which William senses the present crown, in all honesty, misses. He fears it is merely going to deteriorate if significant alterations are not enacted. He is not simply sitting around and anticipating the throne to be his. He is busily engaging before he turns into the monarch. He is currently gathering a squad of specialists and keen people who will assist him in reaching his aim of rendering the regal title as potent as it formerly was. This group will analyze how the crown formerly functioned, how other continental kingdoms run, and the triumphant strategies of prior regal chiefs. They are constructing a fresh structure of statutes that can be utilized for contemporary eras with the requisite measures to guarantee there are no escapes like the ones in his dad's regime. He is not creating this scheme for vengeance or merely to demonstrate that he is a deserving ruler. He is constructing a base for the tomorrow to ensure the endurance of the realm he inhabits, cherishes, and is fated to one day command. William's dream involves stern regulations and lucid choices regarding who is deemed a laboring noble, who is permitted to take part in regal events, and who merits the defense and perks of nobility itself. Presently, the boundaries concerning what it signifies to be regal are blurry. To William, the sport is quite uncomplicated. If you minister to the throne, you are a piece of it. If you do not, you are excluded. A transparent signal that implied the types of Meghan were at risk of misplacing significance. This resolution by William is truly not baseless. Some argue a specific collection of nobles made him irate and provoked this. You wish to discover the fame-seeking genetics in aristocrats throughout time? The craving for rank and wealth has been a potent mortal motivation. The crown, even as an antique method of governing, is no exclusion. It appears everyone wishes to be linked with the regal residence. Cancel that. It appears everyone wishes to be a noble. This is the precise reverse of what William imagines. He desires the designation of noble to pertain solely to those who truly labor for the establishment, not merely those who utilize the clan surname for prestige only. He wishes to discard this specific circumstance that he senses his dad has permitted to continue for too long. Although he has not been anointed yet, William considers that irrespective of his dad's deeds, he needs to intervene to rescue what he perceives as a decaying British crown. His doctrine condenses to one central concept: selectivity. In his perspective, you either enter, minister to the rank, and expire for the rank, and the throne remains with you, or you retreat, pursue liberty, and hunt for social approval, and the throne does not accompany you. To William, the diadem signifies everything, yet if it signifies everything, it cannot pertain to everyone. Selectivity is what grants it might. You cannot possess arbitrary folks with dim domestic links claiming to be nobles. If you do, what in the world does it signify to be noble? Zero. William trusts we cannot allow that, if everyone is slightly regal. Then what does it genuinely denote to be regal? This is a query he allegedly poses to himself repeatedly. He is not attempting to resolve ancient grudges or produce a theatrical show of strength. He is merely attempting to conserve the gravity that the residents formerly sustained. This shift from the antiquated manner of executing things to a contemporary kingdom would entail vital adjustments. It signifies retaining what counts and repairing what fails. Primarily, it entails etching vital boundaries that his dad was never capable of etching due to his sentimental bonds. The present arrangement is founded on deeply rooted customs and revised etiquettes from hundreds of years past, which might or might not be a functioning arrangement for nowadays. William and his crew are laboring behind the curtain to alter this. He wishes to deprive the rank of its former significance and grant it a fresh one. If you labor for the throne and proffer your duty, then you are noble. You acquire the HRH designation. With a fresh survey disclosing a bulk of Britons wish to see Harry divested of his HRH rank. For further details, we are accompanied by a royal specialist regarding public acknowledgement, sway, and everything that arrives with it. If you do not acquire any of these immunities. It is an uncomplicated scheme. Truly, with conversion and conservation in thought, this is aimed at those publicity-hunting nobles who exit to perform Netflix programs, broadcasts, and unnecessary dialogues. In William's opinion, when you exit to perform that, it is for you and yourself solely. It possesses nothing to do with the throne. You will be greeted back into the group only when you return to minister to it. While you elect to be distant pursuing autonomous and self-centered gains utilizing the clan handle, you are not a noble. You are simply a publicity-hunting kinsman. It is straightforward. He desires the ranks of monarch and consort to matter for something once more. His fresh regime is intended to be assessed by their labor, not by strangers, societal sentiment, or news agencies. William wishes the sovereign, the consort, and the kingdom itself to be the entities who determine who is genuinely regal. Those who labor full-time for the throne. Yes, you are included. Your royal family members who are merely related to a formal noble. No, you are not deemed nobility. You still get to retain your pertinence as a family participant. But you are not noble. At least not until you minister to the throne. The issue is, this is a lovely concept and everything. But how? How is this even intended to function? How are these limits intended to be imposed? Shaping this concept of limits. Prince William could not generate this entire skeleton by himself. He had to gather a squad. The attractive aspect about this crew is that it was not just composed of British councillors or folks near to him, no. This was a clandestine unit for which he gathered capable members from all over the globe. Britain, Sweden, Denmark, and Germany. He gathered the supreme crew so he could resolve the supreme dilemma. He particularly selected specialists from those nations because they are instances of zones where the kingdom has triumphantly updated and changed from an antique regime to one that functions in the contemporary world. He required their proficiency to evade misplacing significance. And he required their notions on how to establish solid regal limits. William was constructing a manual of what genuinely succeeds in the 21st century. It was entirely distinct from anything his dad, King Charles, could have ever produced. In this type of circumstance, his dad would have looked for everyone's view and attempted to discover a median terrain so that everybody felt listened to. Prince William, however, conceived of this not as a domestic enterprise but as what it was, the British crown, and he trusted the kingdom was in want of a rescuer and a fresh regulation text. This was the very regulation text that he and his crew were laboring exhaustively to generate. A functioning kingdom ought not be managed like a domestic shop where everyone's emotions are the peak concern, in William's dream. This is a grave organization where the laws are lucid. You observe them entirely, you do not just partake in them sporadically when they are expedient for you. Everybody implied has to be either wholly inside or wholly outside. There is no midpoint. You need to display total dedication and be entirely engaged with the throne. The apparatus he wished to utilize to execute this fresh mode of commanding the kingdom was slightly dull. Maybe, but it was also a very potent type of correspondence. It entailed missives and formal papers shipped via the mail system. It entailed utilizing missives with the regal stamp and the sovereign's autograph to transmit data or, more precisely, to hand down fresh laws. This method yielded no space for participants to discuss verdicts. It did not even supply a route to answer back. You merely obtained your note. And from that instant on, you recognized your destiny. A duplicate would be preserved in the regal records. So you did not need to construct a plea or grumble because the resolution had already been reached by the monarch, the consort, and the ruling council of the regal residence. It was, in his intellect, the flawless manner to enact a statute. Documentation and all that it involves has been a very potent instrument utilized by the British Crown for hundreds of years. William viewed it as something the current age needed to utilize slightly more. Or actually, a great deal more forcefully. Once you possess a formal paper, you possess framework and a lucid verdict. There is no necessity for needless theatrics or disputes. It needed to be fixed and finished. Introduce a fresh note that merely declared, "Gratitude for your duty. We are finished, and the kingdom is proceeding without you. You are no longer deemed noble." That is it. No shape of discussion or mutiny. It was merely a statute enacted and instantly operative. This was the fresh design William and his crew were laboring on. A fresh and massive barricade with the term limit vividly colored on it. The fresh skeleton fundamentally says that all participants laboring for the regal clan get to retain their rank. Certainly, but folks like far-off kinsmen and non-laboring family participants would be honored. But no, they would not be acknowledged as nobility. And to make this occur, he just required Charles's autograph. It was not something that required societal sentiment or a ballot from the residents. He just required one item: the autograph of the chief of the sovereign, the king. This fresh skeleton was to be launched with abandoning nobles in thought, however. One specific noble was to be massively impacted by this huge barricade: the Duchess of Abandonment. Yet what occurs when one of the largest defectors is a top-tier member of the kingdom? The Duchess of Sussex, Meghan Markle, was one of the persons Prince William had in thought when formulating this fresh statute. She was one of the persons whose dominion, everything she has constructed and sold, was grounded on that one term, noble. The designation of Her Royal Highness was her chief vending feature. This fresh barricade William was constructing was going to be one of the largest obstacles her vocation would ever have to surmount. If this fresh statute passed, she would be divested of her HRH rank and lowered to merely the Duchess of Sussex. While the Duchess rank would still be utilized in formal regal papers. In the eyes of the globe, it would not possess the same might as it formerly did. Her entire label and persona were constructed on this regal link. She generated a broadcast dominion based on her regal standing, utilizing the name not just for the duties it bore but for the standing itself. This was something Prince William was busily opposing, a social platform noble. This conflict with the Duchess of Sussex also entailed the two siblings, William and Harry. Even Harry was not excused from this trimming of formal members. He too was lowered in pragmatic terms to merely the Duke of Sussex. William was not shoving these two pivotal members away out of malice. He was merely imposing a rigid explanation of the parts they were now acting. They were no longer laboring nobles, without the prince and princess ranks being actively utilized. Meghan would not possess the same formal gravity she formerly bore. She would be viewed as less significant in the eyes of the press, who ground a lot of a person's significance on the formal rank they hold. It was an approaching catastrophe for her label, as the Duchess simply did not possess the same value and did not unlock the same gates in the mighty chambers where she was constantly functioning. Even after she and her clan departed the castle and relocated, she did not cease. She wound up constructing her dominion to adjust to this fresh reality. After all, the Duchess of Sussex was still a large rank because it was linked to the nobles. Everything she constructed was bound to that one rank. Her dominion did not tumble as significantly as one might anticipate. It proceeded on roughly the same frequency. She is not just another star, she is nobility. At least one who stepped aside. The Duchess of Sussex was a potent rank, in all honesty, but it was viewed as misplacing significance day by day as the limits of William's fresh dream for the kingdom became harder. Naturally, her crew began getting anxious because, after all, her name and pertinence were bound to the regal clan link. Every chamber she strolled into, every broadcast, every press showing, everything was executed with the Duchess of Sussex rank as a preamble. It was what granted press figures like her authority, sights, and a social existence. They realized she would no longer be as precious once that name misplaced the pertinence it possessed. She realized the distinction between being a standard star and being nobility. And she realized she would possess troubles. Everybody realized all her partnerships, the folks she labored with, the large essays about her. They were all about to go down the sewer. They were about to progressively vanish just like the spare limbs being severed from the regal residence. It was a bad dream for her. Prince William, however, did not fret about her misplacing her press pertinence. That had nothing to do with the throne. All he fretted about was guarding the kingdom. All he fretted about was for the instability the kingdom had been undergoing to vanish. All he fretted about was reinstating the vigor of the formerly grand British realm. A grand notion indeed. One could even term it a flawless notion, as novel as it appeared. It was not baseless. This was something diverse kingdoms had encountered before and had surmounted in their own manners. Administration changes normally trail the same distinct designs, duplicating themselves in different ages with different names. But the same pulse existed beneath. Commanders are simply enamored with copying. This potent concept that William elected to utilize was not something he just awoke with one morning, no. It was something much more pragmatic. He had been examining other kingdoms for ages, particularly the ones that have triumphantly changed from antique customs to contemporary times. He examined how they administered their ranks and the members of their residences. One specific instance was very intriguing: Queen Margrethe II of Denmark. A few years ago, the Queen of Denmark executed an action that startled European governance. It was a very daring action and one that Prince William had no option but to observe. She divested 4 of her own grand offspring of their regal ranks. This transmitted a tremor across the globe. These were not far-off kinsmen or fostered family members. They were her own natural grand offspring. Her resolution was a daring declaration telling everybody exactly what the Danish kingdom represented. What a kingdom ought to represent. Which was exactly the sort of lucidity Prince William was hunting for. When she reached the resolution, she clarified that having so many folks with regal ranks produces bewilderment in a kingdom. You do not need bewilderment. You need lucidity and might. It is a supreme regime. So you need supremacy, not a circumstance where everyone is encompassed. For Prince William and his squad, this concept resonated almost instantly. This was exactly what they were hunting for. The supremacy and totality of a kingdom where you could distinguish who was actually symbolizing the clan on a grander scale. He examined the social response and how Queen Margrethe managed the fallout and criticism that arrived with such a disputable statute. This granted him perception into what to do if he were to enact a parallel statute in the British kingdom and how to manage the occurrences that would develop subsequently. Naturally, there are massive distinctions between Britain and Denmark. But that was one of the chief grounds he gathered a squad of global specialists to remain by his flank. Folks spoke about how tough this was on the Danish clan members. But in hindsight, it was requisite. The kingdom emerged tougher and more joined. And many of the frailties it possessed before were cast aside one by one. Prince William centered not just on what she did but on how she did it. It was hushed, measured, and total, something his dad would never have done. She executed it in a manner that displayed her might and her dream. This was something William desired for himself. Something he sensed he was constructed to do. And something he observed his dad was not prepared to do. His perspective on this was plain. Kingdoms must alter before they're compelled to. You do not wait for a catastrophe to strike. You move when a catastrophe is on the skyline, when too many folks possess ranks and are watering down the label. It is time to make an alteration. The prince was not just examining Denmark, he was examining Sweden, the Netherlands, and Spain. He was busily looking at how other kingdoms function and continuously examining their motions to develop and resolve his own approaching quandary. The shared motif in all the kingdoms he examined was their triumphant updating. He was attempting to calculate how they remained pertinent without misplacing their heritage and customs. He needed to realize what was attractive to the 21st century so he could utilize it in his own kingdom without misplacing hundreds of years of custom. Locating the border between remaining pertinent and not misplacing what rendered them unique. That was the query he constantly posed to himself and his squad of specialists. Prince William and his squad. The Duchess of Sussex and her squad. There was one concluding confrontation between these two, copyright and copyright blockage. While William was in London constructing the skeleton for a fresh era of nobility and the exclusion of hesitant nobles, Meghan's crew on the other flank of the globe was acquiring alerts. They grew suspicious as terms like rank revisions, reorganization, and exclusion began leaking through to them. They instantly began sketching up schemes on their control panel, hunting for a fresh route to evade the hazard from this fresh regime that was about to be executed. Meghan did not possess dim folks on her crew. Just as William did not, they all realized it was time to move quickly. Quicker than the other faction. It was a conflict on two boundaries. One was struggling for the pertinence of the British realm, and the other was struggling for the pertinence of her private label. These words that were leaking in became increasingly concrete. And Meghan's crew was not dense. They realized their icon's press existence heavily relied on her regal link. So instantly they began executing simulations, hunting for slants, and scheming ceaselessly, searching for routes to guard what they had occupied so long constructing. Finally, they arrived at a deduction, a copyright. A copyright on the name Duchess of Sussex was a desperate attempt to guard what they had constructed. Although her standing had already dropped significantly from what it formerly was. They were not about to permit their fame to get smashed under Prince William's crusade for the British realm's supremacy. It was a route to possess what was still there before it was vanished entirely. To possess it eternally, it was shrewd. At least on the exterior. If the copyright became triumphant, the dialogue would not just be about regal etiquettes anymore, it would shift to it being her handle. Nobody would fret about the formal laws. Everybody would still identify her with the rank of Duchess. Harry and Meghan, the Duke and Duchess of Sussex, will shortly cease the regal ranks, and according to a declaration from Buckingham Palace. It was a shrewd toss. But this shrewd toss was shortly diminished to powder as the castle observed it arriving from miles distant. There were already standing etiquettes in position. Not just from the prince but from the regal residence itself. These were etiquettes that had been in position for decades to stop the privatization of civic ranks by persons. The endeavor to merchandise a regal rank by Meghan's crew was already blocked by the castle long before the documentation was even conceived into reality. This was not a conflict Meghan could triumph. Her crew was not on the same tier as the prince's crew, which possessed a scheme B, C and D for any path she could have selected to surmount the regime. There was just no route Meghan could penetrate this. That was indeed the finale for Meghan and other nobles like her who just desired the rank of nobility for no other cause than private usage. It was the finale that Prince William had labored so hard to guarantee. In all truthfulness, what would you have done to Prince William if you were in Prince Harry's boots? And what do you think it felt like for Meghan and her crew to misplace pertinence like that? Distribute your notions with us in the remark area. Recall to like, distribute, and join for more. Also tap the subsequent video displaying on your display. You will appreciate it.